Hi there, welcome to the Dr. Grant Show. Today's episode, I am covering 5 mistakes new cooks make and what to do instead. So this episode is for people that burn water or people that don't want to die of food poisoning. This episode isn't for, it's pretty much for people that you already are kind of in the rhythm of cooking. You know exactly what you're doing. You've made a few items and you're okay. Now, this episode is going to take a different and unique look and different and unique approach to cooking, because what I'm going to be talking about and sharing with you is your mindset and the prep work that you're going to need to do before you even pick up that pot to boil the water in, before you pick your entree, before you even look at the recipe. Because before you become that great and excellent master chef that you've always dreamed of, or if you're just ultimately looking to just make a meal that you can stomach or that friends and family can stomach, then this is for you. First of all, let's start with your mindset when you embark upon making a dish. Instead of saying, I'm going to make this foo-foo fancy dish that is covered in this special cream sauce and blah, 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 especially if you're new to cooking or you're just not that experienced in cooking, try this mindset shift. Name your new attempts and your dishes as a delightful experiment, not just an experiment. See, Frankenstein, now that was an experiment, but a delightful experiment falls in the area of such wonderful creations such as potato chips, sandwiches, ice cream cones, electricity. Now, these were all delightful experiments. They were both delicious and illuminating. No pun intended. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and discuss those 5 mistakes that new cooks make and kind of what to do instead, okay? First mistake, picking recipes that contain unfamiliar ingredients. Have you ever looked up a recipe and you saw maybe half of the ingredients you're familiar with, but those other ones, you don't even have an idea on what to do with those or how to do with those? See, when you pick recipes that contain unfamiliar ingredients, especially if the majority of the ingredients are ingredients that you're unfamiliar with, what it does is messes with your self-efficacy. This is a psychological term that is a key component of what's called social cognitive theory. Self-efficacy pertains to your ability to believe that you can essentially accomplish what it is you said that you were going to go out and accomplish, no matter what it is. So, when you pick recipes that contain really unfamiliar ingredients, already your self-efficacy, here's self-efficacy, and it's just getting smacked around. You don't want that. The solution and what to do instead is pick recipes that contain either all ingredients that you're familiar with or a majority of ingredients that you're familiar with. Because what this does is not only does it raise and boost your self-efficacy, but it also does another awesome sauce thing. What it does for you is you can almost taste how that new combination and new approach would actually turn out, which is really huge and very important as you go about preparing the dish and embarking upon this new dish that perhaps you've never done before. Here's another side tip. Pick one recipe at a time, okay? Just one. This way, you're not tasking yourself with making 4 or 5 different dishes that you're totally unfamiliar with, so you're becoming uncomfortable multiple times. And it also increases the chances of something going wrong. And what your brain does when you embark upon something new, it will tend to, in that case, lump all 5 attempts. If you attempted 5 new recipes at the same time within a short time period, and you've never done that before, your brain will rank that and say, especially if you experience some challenges, your brain will rank that and say, see, I told you this cooking thing was a bad idea. What you should have done, you should have just went ahead and gotten the fast food or went to your restaurant like you normally do. You should have called for delivery. And that's not what we want our brains to default into. You see, your body, your brain, it loves you. And its job is to keep you safe. And often what is safe is also labeled as being familiar. As to whether or not being familiar is good for you is entirely debatable. So, hopefully number 1 makes sense. Number 2, not asking your restaurant how they prepare your favorite dish. We've all got them. We all have our favorite restaurant that we go to, and we want to know how to prepare that wonderful dish. You'd be surprised how often you can just ask that question and you'll get an answer. Let me tell you a story just for proof. I was in Kentucky on business not too long ago, and I went to this Asian restaurant, and I'm a huge fan of Asian food, especially Thai food. And I had ordered a shrimp pad Thai, one of my favorite dishes. This actually happened quite some time ago now that I think about it. At the time, I was just contemplating and learning how to make Asian food and my favorite Asian dishes. I had looked up tons and tons of recipes. I even found a recipe for shrimp pad Thai that included using ketchup. Now, at that time, I had never attempted to make shrimp pad Thai before, but I was pretty confident that it didn't include ketchup as one of the ingredients. It just did not seem to be authentic to me. So I was sharing with the restaurant owner my dilemma and my desire to learn how to make shrimp pad Thai. And a magical and wonderful thing happened. The restaurant owner took me in the kitchen, the back area and kitchen of the restaurant, and introduced me to his chef. And his chef showed me step by step how to create and make shrimp pad Thai, which totally transformed and blew my mind. It also showed me how easy it was to actually make it. And it gave me the confidence to not only learn how to make shrimp pad Thai myself at home, but to also try other dishes that I was uncomfortable with in making. And they turned out great, at least most of the time. Then I tried this exercise again. I tried it again at different restaurants. And most of the time, if they didn't invite me back into their kitchen, the head chef would come out and we would have a chat essentially about the key areas and the key ways to make that dish. So, and there's a way to go about asking this question of your favorite restaurant. The key way to ask is this. Let them know that you are so enamored and in love with their food. But the reality is, and just be frank, look, I love your food. My favorite dish is shrimp pad Thai, or fill in the blank here for whatever your favorite dish is. But I've been struggling with how to make it. Here's how I've been exploring and making it. What do you do? Because I really love the way that your food tastes. Now look, even if you take me step by step, which I love by the way, but even if you took me step by step and showed me how to make this, I'm still coming back. So don't worry about losing business because there are just going to be plenty of days where I just simply want someone to cook for me. And trust me, there's no way I can make all of the dishes that are listed on your menu, but I really appreciate your help here. Okay? That's how you ask. Number 3, not double checking measurements. When I was younger, about 30 years ago, I wanted to make this cake called a Coca-Cola cake. It was my first big step in the direction of learning how to cook. And so I looked up all the ingredients, and I got them out. A Coca-Cola cake, just in case you're wondering, it is the equivalent of a chocolate cake, just with some cocoa and some Coca-Cola at that time. So I looked up the ingredients, I laid them all out, I got the sugar, the butter, I grabbed everything, and I saw on the listing for the ingredients, it said 1C of Coca-Cola. I said, okay. So I grabbed 1 can of Coca-Cola, and I dumped it at that time into the bowl. And as I began adding the other ingredients, the flour, the sugar, the cocoa, I noticed that this cake was not looking at all the way it should be looking, this batter. And I called my mom at that time and asked her what's going on. And she shared with me 1C equals 1 cup. And I said, well, who the heck came up with that? I thought at that time that 1C meant 1 can. Now, the reason why this is so devastating to a recipe for those of you that are new to cooking and wondering why is this such a big deal and why this throws off the recipe is 1 cup equals about 8 ounces of liquid. 1 can of cola is 16 ounces. So this is why in the end, my batter was super liquidy. There is a bright side to this story, however. I also learned some math that day, because when you goof up when you cook, when you goof up when you cook, you begin to learn how to compensate for other ingredients. So this one was a math problem, essentially. So that would also mean, how much more ounces, essentially, would 16 ounces be compared to 8? So that basically meant that I need to double all the ingredients and just add them again and make double the amount of cake. So the recipe turned out good, especially for it being 30 years ago. But I learned a really important lesson because I didn't know at that time about standard measurements. And at the time I was so upset because I said, well, why would anyone say 1C? Doesn't everyone know that 1C means 1 can? And my mother said, no, everyone knows that 1C means 1 cup. So here's my point. Double check your ingredients. I also, from my end, have also made the mistake of, when not looking closely, overlooking teaspoon versus tablespoon. And there is a huge difference in that measurement when a recipe calls for 1 teaspoon of something versus 1 tablespoon of something. So double check those measurements. And here's another way and a time-saving tip. Combine your dry ingredients the day or the night before. When you take this approach, a wonderful thing winds up happening. You add the wet ingredients the day after, and it increases the probability of 2 things. Number 1, it increases the probability of you having an awesome, wonderful recipe and your item turning out really great. The second thing is it drastically reduces the amount of errors that you make. This tip for you moms out there is also really, really key, because often we're interrupted when we're cooking because of our children, especially those of you that have young children at home. And it's so easy to lose track of your recipe. And that's when mistakes happen. So combining your dry ingredients, this is especially helpful if you're making like breakfast, such as pancakes, or if you're making cakes or muffins or any of those things. Number 4, dull knives. Any recipe that calls for cutting up fresh fruit or vegetables, you're going to want to make sure that your knife is as sharp as possible. Now, I've actually had people ask, well, how in the world do I sharpen a knife? This is how you do it. I'm going to turn the knife sideways and you sharpen it like so. So this is how you actually sharpen your knife. Having a dull knife makes life so much more challenging because of the fact that it makes it harder for you to just quickly chop up your fruits and your vegetables just like that. So that is the reason why it's so important to have a sharpened knife. Number 5, using olive oil for everything. Here's the challenge and the caveat with that. Olive oil is wonderful for a lot of things, but high temperature cooking is not one of them. Using olive oil for those kinds of dishes, what winds up happening is olive oil, as well as other certain oils, have a certain smoke point. A smoke point meaning once you go past that temperature, certain carcinogens and toxins begin to be released in that oil, especially if you choose to eat the food that oil has been cooked in. So instead, look for oils that have a higher smoke point. Oils that have a higher smoke point can include oils such as avocado oil, even Mediterranean oil, which is usually a nice blend of different oils all put together. I have several oils here to show you. You have toasted sesame seed oil. You also have truffle oil. Toasted sesame seed oil, for those of you that are huge fans of foods that have more of an Asian-esque flavor to them, toasted sesame seed oil is a wonderful oil to add and saute your dishes in and your meats. And truffle oil is also wonderful, and it gives a very nice earthy flavor that's not overwhelming, okay? So branch out. Use different oils for everything. Number 6, not being open to substitutions. What do I mean by that? Switch out your meats would be number 1. For example, I'm vegetarian and pescatarian, kind of flirting with vegetarianism, but the only meat that I eat is fish. So how many times have you looked and you've seen a recipe and maybe it had a meat that you didn't really care for? It's okay. Just switch the meat out and substitute for the meat that you do like. It'll turn out perfectly fine, I promise. For those vegetarians out there, you can explore meat substitutes. Those protein substitutes can be something like seitan, which is made of a wheat gluten. It can be, I think it's called temp. Another vegetarian substitute can also include, I'm trying to think of the name of this item, jackfruit, yes. Or you can just go ahead and use mushrooms. I highly recommend, for their more meatier texture and flavor, portobello mushrooms, okay? Another thing for substitutions, don't freak out if it turns out that you don't have the main ingredient that you're looking for. A perfect example of this would definitely be buttermilk. If you only have regular milk at home, that's fine. You'll just need something to quasi-curdle the milk. Adding just a few drops of lemon juice will do the trick, or maybe just a little drop of white vinegar. You can't taste the vinegar. And voila, you have buttermilk. Number 7, forgetting to taste test before turning off the heat. Definitely make sure, where pasta is concerned, and rice, taste test these items before you turn off the heat. How do you do this? How do you do this effectively? An example as it pertains to pasta, make sure you don't turn off your fire when you're boiling your pasta. Just take a pair of tongs that you use maybe for barbecue, for example. Grab 1 or 2 pasta noodles, drop them on your plate, blow on them to make sure that they're cooled off adequately, and just bite the end or pop the whole thing in your mouth and see how it tastes and how it feels to you. Same thing goes for rice. You want to just get maybe a couple of little, grains of rice and rub them a little bit between your fingers to test the firmness of the rice. That way you haven't completely wasted an entire pot of your pasta and rice. There's nothing I feel worse than trying to make a dish and then you cook according to what the package instructions state. And remember, package instructions are just simply meant to be a guide. Your cooking time can be contingent on so many things. How hot your oven is, how hot your flame is, the minerals in your water, the pot that you're boiling your pasta or your rice in. So taste test when possible. Taste test before turning off the heat. This way, this ensures that you get the dish you want, because there is nothing worse than throwing the sauces and everything and the seasonings on your pasta or your rice. And then you go to take a forkful and then you discover it's woefully undercooked. You can't throw it back in to boil. Number 8, not knowing your seasoning superstars lineup. What do I mean by this? Have your 5 or 10 go-to seasoning superstars that you usually and regularly use, that you know based on your flavor profile, what you like to eat and those in your household like to eat. And also have a couple of spice mixes as well. Spice mixes are awesome. And the reason why they're so awesome is because of the fact that all the work's done for you. You just sprinkle it on your veggie and pop it in the oven or saute it and boom, you're done. So let me show you my seasoning superstar lineup. Number 1, pink Himalayan sea salt. That's number 1. You will see in my cooking segments, I often use it, and I always use it this way because I'm going to want to sprinkle it gradually until the food looks like and can kind of taste like what I want to taste like. This way, you also avoid problems and challenges and surprises in your final product. You want to season as you cook when you're salting your dishes when at all possible. My other favorite items and superstars are powdered onion, granulated garlic, and then here come my spice blends. Here I have a roasted vegetable blend, but don't let the title fool you. You can put this on vegetables. You can also use it to season pasta. So if you're trying to make like a nice quick pasta with extra virgin olive oil and you're looking to maybe add a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper, a little bit of onion, a little bit of garlic, but you want a new taste, toss that out the window and instead use a spice blend. Here's another spice blend I'm a huge fan of: roasted garlic, rosemary, and sea salt. Here's another spice blend: maple barbecue rub. Rubs are awesome. Take the rub out of its box that you have it in when you see spice rubs. Often the mistake that people make is that they assume that a spice rub can only be put on meat. But the reality is you can use spice rubs for your veggies as well, and it gives your vegetables a brand new flavor, making it delicious. And also it includes and incorporates flavors that you've essentially never had before, which is really what you want when you're looking for food that tastes delicious and keeps you from binging and overeating, especially your fast food choices. Okay? Here's another set of rubs. Smoky brown sugar. And then my other one, honey garlic. Now, here's another thing that's super important. Sauce. I could do a whole show on sauce alone. My favorite sauce, I probably just want to be buried with this when I die, is sriracha. I love how sriracha makes and brings out the flavor and the seasoning in food. You can use sriracha on eggs. You can use it on anything. You can put it on your French fries. I've even heard of people, now I've never tried this before, but it does sound pretty awesome sauce. I've heard people even adding sriracha to black tea, just a little squirt, just to make it interesting. Once again, never tried it before, but you can do a lot of things with sriracha. You can take the plainest, most boring dish in the entire planet and add sriracha on it, and it's just magic in your mouth. So taking these tips and using these tips will make you into a better cook, but faster, easier. And isn't that what you want? Now, what in the world does this have to do with food addiction, symptoms such as overeating, binge eating, especially binge eating at night, emotional eating, giving in to food cravings? What does any of this have to do with that? A lot. You see, many women that I work with often wrestle and struggle with binging and overeating. And when those urges hit, they want food and they want food now. And that's what makes fast food so very appealing, because you can get it instantly. But learning how to cook, but not only learning how to cook, but learning how to cook foods that you like, that you enjoy, it gives you healthier options. It also means you can take more control over your health. You also wind up knowing where your food is coming from, and you can customize stuff to your own taste. Another thing is you can up the protein, because clinical studies and research has shown that for people that are tempted and that have a habit of binge eating, especially at night, when you learn to increase your protein intake, but if you do this with foods that you made and that you cooked, it begins to reduce your episodes of binging. And the final important point is you wind up learning how to avoid foods that contain two ingredients that have been shown in scientific studies to actually increase the chances of you binging and overeating. And those two ingredients are high fructose corn syrup and MSG. All right, I know I covered 8. I covered 8 mistakes instead of 5. And I hope you don't mind, because I usually in all areas like to underpromise and over-deliver. But what I've been covering in today's show are 8 instead of 5. 8 mistakes that new cooks make, and really what to do about that. For those of you that are new to the Dr. Grant Show and don't know my story, my name is Dr. Kirsten Grant, and I have my doctorate degree in health psychology as well as clinical holistic nutrition. And I'm certified in hypnotherapy, getting certified and trained in hypnotherapy, tapping known as emotional freedom technique, as well as a lot of other areas to help you reprogram your brain, and also finishing up training and certification in yoga, and I'm certified personal trainer. I share this information with you in order to give you the tools that you need to overcome the urge to give in to your food cravings and overcome the urge to give in to binges, especially nighttime binges. And the reason why I'm so passionate about this is I lost my mother to food addiction in 2016. And unfortunately, when I lost my mother to food addiction, when that happened, she was so heavy that we didn't know if we were going to be able to find a coffin to bury her in. And she was also so heavy that they almost dropped her on the way to the burial site. And I don't want anyone to go through what my family went through, because when my mother passed away, after all the dust had settled, I was going through her things. I found 3 dresser drawers that were filled with nothing but diet books and magazines and all these clippings ranging all the way back to before I was born in like the 1970s. And it began to dawn on me that my mother suffered from food addiction, and it wasn't a lack of information. People that overeat and binge and have a hard time and struggle with this, and I see somebody's joined us, hi, welcome. They don't struggle and with their overeating and binging because they don't have enough information. When my mother passed away, she had so much information on how to lose weight. It's also not about calorie counting. It's also not about willpower. What it is about is learning the tools that you need in order to prevent the urge to be overwhelmed and prevent that stream and tide of negative emotions and thoughts that sometimes come to your head when life happens. And everyone's different so far as what stresses them out and what moves them in the direction of feeling like they're just out of whack and out of balance. But you need the tools in order to do that. So what I did is I designed a scientific study, and online I recruited thousands of women to participate in an online study to help them with binging and overeating and food cravings. I divide them into 2 groups, and I use a psychological theory called social cognitive theory to help them reprogram their minds. And I gave them a questionnaire called the Yale Food Addiction Scale, which is used to measure and educate people on food addiction and whether or not they are food addicted, and to gauge and figure out how strong they are, you know, in terms of food addiction symptoms. And a funny thing happened in 4 weeks. I surveyed them before and I surveyed them after, and women in both groups lost weight. And I wasn't even looking for that. I was just looking to reduce the symptoms, which happened as well. But women in a matter of 4 weeks lost as much as 20 pounds online with that program that I created. So I realized I might be onto something, and I tweaked it a bit more, and I added more tools to help women that struggle with overeating. And I added even a physical workout component. So now what we have is hypnotherapy. We have other tools to help you when it's late at 2 a.m. and you don't have anybody to call. Actually turn that subconscious mind in the right direction and reprogram your mind so that you don't give in to the urge to overeat and binge. I also added a cooking, well, more cooking components like you see with this, but I actually added more cooking where I give you step-by-step instructions on how to cook dishes that you like. I also added a fitness component as well, and you have group yoga classes and group workouts and one-on-one coaching as well, and mentoring. So hopefully this show and what I'm giving you, and the goal of the show is to give you the tools that you need and get you on that right track and set you on the right path. But if what I'm sharing with you sounds good and you think you might want a little bit more help with that, Feel free to direct message me and DM me. I can be found on Facebook under Edible Addiction. I can be found on Instagram. That is under Kirsten Grant, PhD. I can also be found on my website, edibleaddiction.com. All right, you have been watching the Dr. Grant Show, and today's show topic was 5 mistakes. Well, okay, I covered more than 5, but 5 mistakes that new cooks make and what to do instead. We are on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Wednesdays, we go live so we can answer your questions. And much love to you, and have a wonderful, fantastic day.